Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I've got a great guest with me here this week. I know I say that every week, but it is really true this time. I have Spike Cohen. He was the Libertarian Party's vice presidential nominee in 2020. Spike, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me on, Brad. I appreciate it, man.
What is Spike your real first name?
No, so I changed my name when I was 3, and it's a very macho story. I was 3 years old. My older brother had convinced me that Jeremy, which is that's my actual legal name, that Jeremy was a girl's name like Julie or Jenny. Again, I was 3. And so I was looking for a new name, and we went to see, again, very macho story. And again, I was 3. We went to see the My Little Pony movie. And the purple dragon Spike saved the day in the movie. And being a 3-year-old, that was all I could think about. And so I said, I'm Spike. And my parents said that, no, your name's Jeremy. They actually took me to a doctor who had a talk with me and said to them, there's nothing wrong with him. He just really wants to be called Spike. Go ahead and do it. It's a phase. He'll grow out of it. I'm now 39 years old.
That's hilarious. That really is.
Yes.
In the sense that, how did we go? So let's just get to know Spike Cohen a little bit, or
Sure,
Jeremy
sure.
Cohen, your story, right? How did we go from a 3-year-old watching My Little Pony and picking a new name to getting into politics and running for vice president?
Many, many years. No, I actually am new to politics from an electoral standpoint. My background is in business. I actually, when I was 16, I started a web design company. This was back in 98, late 98, early 99. I started a web design company, and I was able to successfully grow that into a fairly successful business. But during that time, I was actually, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I actually became a neocon. Keep in mind, I was 19. Yeah, I know. Keep in mind, I was 19 when 9/11 happened. And I was horrified, as everyone else was, when they were watching this unfold. And, at the time we're thinking, is this, the new normal? Is this going to be happening constantly? Are we never going to be safe to go outside again? And, the government and the media were telling me that we were being attacked by a group of people who hated us because we were just so darn free and prosperous. And they hated that because they weren't free. And so they were going to get it back at us for being free by killing us and taking over so we could also be not free. Or something. It makes no sense now, but again, I didn't have the context and perspective of knowing that this was just the newest of the intelligence communities and military-industrial complexes series of lies over the past several decades, and so I bought it. And I bought that we needed to, take over Afghanistan, not just get bin Laden, but take over Afghanistan, and that we needed to take over Iraq and take over any other country that got in the way. And I was a really bad neocon. Now, 2 things happened. As my business kept getting more and more successful, I saw what happens to companies as they become successful. They just get punished. I was being treated like I had done something wrong. I was getting more fees. I was getting more taxes. I was getting more regulations. I was getting more, issues with, all sorts of stuff that happens when you start making some serious money. Of course, until you become a multi-billionaire and then you make the government work for you. But I had never actually gotten quite to that point. And the other thing that happened was all of the things that I was told would happen by these annoying libertarians and anti-war people like Matt Kibbe and Ron Paul and everyone else. All the things they said would happen in the Middle East and in Afghanistan, that it would be, leaks would come out to show that everything we were told was a lie, that we would not be greeted as liberators, but as occupiers, that it would lead to blowback and more recruitment for terror groups, and that, thousands, however many countless American lives would be ruined, and not to mention all the lives in the countries that are being invaded and bombed and occupied. And those were all coming true. And so I really started to realize, I don't think there's anything government does that isn't based on a lie or some power grab or some attempt to rob me. And that kind of led me on the path from becoming a neocon. And it was a process. I kind of went from being a neocon to sort of a constitutional conservative to being somewhere between a conservative and libertarian for a while. And then eventually to being a full-on libertarian, a Super Saiyan libertarian, as I call it.
And how did you end up getting into the 2020 election and actual elected office side of politics?
So So it was actually the path towards getting into electoral politics started in earnest about 7 years ago. One day I woke up, the right side of my body was going numb. And fast forward a couple weeks later, the doctors told me, it looks like you have MS. You have damage in your spinal cord that looks pretty much like you have MS. And it took another year and a half, actually almost two and a half years, to confirm that diagnosis that I had MS. And at that point, I realized that I had reached a point where I didn't have to work anymore to be able to make ends meet and to be able to live a fairly comfortable life. And I thought, I don't know what's going to come tomorrow. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here. At that point in my life, I was having a relapse every other month. It was really bad. And I was looking at a really bad trajectory. And so I thought, well, what is it I want to do with however much time I have on this earth? And I realized I wanted to talk to people about liberty. At this point, I was a full-on libertarian. And I thought, I want to talk to people about being free. I want to be able to use the organizational building skills that I've learned in running this business and in being involved with many other successful startups. I want to use the sales and marketing and messaging techniques I've learned and bring it to the world of liberty. And that started with my getting involved with Muddied Waters Media and starting my podcast and sort of presenting a different way of presenting libertarianism. And then in 2019, I was asked to run for the VP nomination. And I thought, okay, well, I'll go in and I'll show them how it can be done. And so instead of doing the typical going to lots of conventions, I went to like 3 conventions, I think, 3 conventions, and going to all the conventions to talk with the delegates. Instead, I was going out into the normie world and doing things there. I was doing college campus tours, both in person and online once the pandemic hit and the lockdowns hit, doing door knocking tours in everything from suburban middle class neighborhoods all the way to housing projects and everything in between, and just going out and sharing the message of liberty, literally knocking on doors and meeting people where they were. And I would go to online conventions, or I'd put out media and I'd say, here's how we can do this. Here is a way to do it. And I was waiting for them to say, hey, that's great. That sounds good. We're now going to pick, I don't know, Larry Sharp or whoever to be the VP. And I was ready for that. And then sometime in like late April, early May, I realized, I think they're going to give me this thing. And they did. They ended up nominating me because that's how we actually pick our presidential and vice presidential picks separately. And coming into the last 2 or 3 weeks of the process, at that point, I was fairly certain they were actually going to pick me. And I hit the ground running and I haven't stopped ever since.
And were you originally running with Vermin Supreme?
Yes. So it was actually Vermin Supreme who asked me. I didn't know how deep you wanted to go into it. But yeah, Vermin was actually the one, he and his team were the one who reached out to me and asked me if I would like to run as his proposed running mate. And I said, yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. And so, Vermin did his style of campaigning, and I did my style of showing here's how we can present liberty to the greater audience. That was how it happened. And in fact, I actually saw Vermin yesterday. We happened to be on the same flight back from Alabama, and we hung out in the airport for about a half hour before I had to make my connecting flight.
That's funny. I mean, he's a funny guy, but he's sort of a meme candidate, right? Like, isn't he the guy that wanted to give everybody a pony?
Yes, he's going to give everyone a pony. He's going to mandate that you have to brush your teeth. He's going to harness zombie power, and he's going to go back in time to kill baby Hitler. Now, these are all satirical allegories for the free ponies. Is politicians tell you they're going to give you all this stuff. They're just going to pull it out of nowhere and give you all this stuff. And deep down, it's not true. So how's it any weirder for him to offer you free ponies when you know that's not true? The mandatory toothbrushing thing. If you got to wear a seatbelt, or if you got to wear a helmet, or, now you got to wear a mask, you have to do these things that because they're safe, we're going to make you do it. How is that any different than saying you have to brush your teeth? You can actually cause far more damage by not brushing your teeth than by not wearing a seatbelt. So how is that any more ridiculous? Even the boot on your head is an allegory for, we put so much importance on, this fancy sheet of paper that was signed, and it gives it all this official documentation. This is an official sheet of paper because I said so. And this badge says that I have special authorities that you have to respect. If that's the case, why can't I just put a boot on my head? So it's all a satirical way of reaching people who recognize that this entire system is a sick and cynical joke. And the point of that is to kind of use a very as Vermin has put it, buffoonish or slapstick style of comedy to really drive home a greater message that, at least with this joke, we're acknowledging that it's a joke. The politicians in office will say it, deadpan it to you, and you're supposed to believe it's true.
Yeah, well, and the thing that interests me about you is that you kind of, I guess the Vermin Supreme approach is one approach, and then there's another approach, there's several other approaches in the Libertarian Party, some that really reject that approach. But you seem to be one of the only people that's kind of threaded the needle or walked between both groups. What do you think about that?
So what I try to do is there are many different ways to reach people. And I can't be all things to all people. And if you try to do that, you end up being nothing to anyone. But I do believe that there is a way to use humor. Now, my form of humor is obviously different than Vermin's. It's a little bit more dry type of humor, kind of almost like a sarcasm type of humor, meme type of humor that I use. But you can use humor to reach people with a serious message, as long as you have an actual serious message behind it. If you're just using humor out there and you can't bring them into a serious message, then you've kind of lost it. You look at someone like George Carlin. George Carlin would tell very goofy humor and very biting, cutting humor, and then about halfway through, he's just hitting you with anti-establishment, borderline anarchist agitprop, and the people are just eating it up. They're in a single punchline for like 20-30 minutes, but it's because he used humor to knock down their cognitive defenses and get them to actually listen to what his message is. I also do obviously a lot of very serious stuff as well, but I do believe there is room for humor. There is room in certain spaces when appropriate to use a humorous, sometimes sarcastic, and even dry approach to bring people into a greater, more serious message.
Yeah, it's about striking a balance, and there's nothing worse than people in politics or journalism or anything that take themselves too seriously. Right. But I guess to shift slightly, how do you look back at the 2020 campaign that you ran with Jo Jorgensen, the results? What's your kind of general reflection on it? So the positives are obviously that we saw a massive increase in the number of LP members. Membership grew by something like 50% last year. The number of registered libertarians went up by, I forget the exact number, but it's double digits. It's over 10%. We saw a record number of libertarians are now elected to offices across the country. This is post-election, but as sort of a proof of concept moving forward from the momentum of that race. Back in April, we had special elections in 4 or 5 different states. And of the races that the Libertarian Party targeted, we won something like 56% of them. We won more races than the Republicans and the Republicans and the Democrats, all the Republicrats combined as the Libertarian Party of the races that we targeted in that race. So those are the positives that I got from it, not to mention meeting incredible liberty activists and candidates across the country. The actual experience itself is unlike anything else. I'm not sure, I don't know a lot of people who campaigned on a bus with their name on the side of it. It was just an incredible experience last year. The biggest things I learned as a takeaway from that, number one, I wish that, and I was saying it, and certainly not to throw any individual under the bus. It was more just the general campaign's leadership sense that we needed to talk about many different things and sort of present the entire libertarian message with whatever attention we got. And what I kept saying is, no, we need to be the people who are against the lockdowns. We need to be the people who have solutions to police brutality. We need to be the people that when an issue is happening that literally everyone else in the country, and in the case of the pandemic on earth, are talking about, we have to be talking about that thing because we have the best solutions to it. No one else was willing to tell the truth about the pandemic, that the reason it was so bad here to begin with is that the CDC wasn't allowing testing for months, for nearly 2 months during the outbreak. And that then you had state governments that were shoving COVID patients into nursing homes and disability homes where the people were most likely to die from it. Like, no one else was talking about this, and no one else was saying, people would say, oh, the lockdowns are bad, but they weren't talking about the fact that it was a blatant violation of our rights, and that it was a proof positive example of what happens when government presumes to have too much authority. They will literally tell you whether or not you're essential, whether or not you're allowed to go outside. That needed to be the purpose of everything we were saying. Yes, we said we were against lockdowns, and yes, I did multiple illegal
civil disobedience rallies across the country in open defiance of lockdown orders. But if that's not our central message when everyone else is talking about it, we lose something there. We weren't going to win on it, but we could have possibly gotten more votes than ever before, or at least more than we ended up getting. And then I would say the other thing is actually a positive message that I learned is that we need to work local. We need to, you can do with pennies at the local level what it costs hundreds of dollars to do at a national level. And we can actually win there. We can actually win at the local level and build up from the grassroots. And, there were some greater things about just the overall culture within the LP that we can talk about if you want. But within the actual campaign itself, that was the biggest takeaways that I got moving forward.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I've always wondered why libertarian candidates or Libertarian Party candidates don't run just not single issue platforms, but just a few issues. I mean, because there are some libertarian ideas that are extremely popular, but the whole package is new to a lot of people. So what you're saying there makes a lot of sense. But I guess I do wonder, do you think that it was in 2016, right? Gary and Bill, whatever you think of them, they got what, 3.3% of the vote?
3.3%, yeah.
4.4 million votes.
Yep.
And this time around, it was about 1.2% and 1,800,000 and 650,000. Well, math and numbers, just under 2 million votes. Do you view that as a step backwards, or was it kind of, I mean, this election was obviously not ideal with the pandemic and with Trump and Biden and a bunch of other things. So do you view it as a step backwards or a step forward?
Well, I'll give you the official LP response, and then I'll give you mine. The official LP response is that it's the second highest number that we've ever gotten, and it's the highest. I think probably more importantly than that, it's the highest number we've ever gotten during a presidential reelection campaign. So when an incumbent is running for reelection, it becomes a lot more about whether to keep that person in office or replace them. There's also the fact, the COVID and the lockdowns and all that hurt us as well. There's theories that the fact that Gary and Bill were able to do well led the media to make sure, or do well compared to how we've done in the past, led the media to do a total blackout of our campaign. And then again, we saw massive growth in membership and a number of registered libertarians. Here's my answer. Yes, it was a big step back in terms of vote count. We weren't going to win. The likelihood of us even getting the 5% that gets us minor party status, that was exceedingly low in any kind of situation. If for no other reason than we weren't going to be able to raise the $50 to $100 million it would take to actually break into that next tier, or at least 20 or 30 million. It also exposed what I believe is, I call it a culture of losing within the party, because the day after, when those election results came in, I was extremely disappointed. I was hoping that we would at least be able to break into 2%, or at least come close, or maybe even do better than Gary and Bill did. And we didn't. And that was very disappointing. I wake up the next morning and I'm getting phone calls and emails and text messages from everyone congratulating me. And I said, hey, thanks. Why are you? Yeah. I'm like, every single one of them. Why are you congratulating me? Oh, you did your best. And, the media always shuts us out, and they were never going to let us on the debate stage. And, we got the second highest number of votes and the highest number during a reelection campaign, and double digit growth, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, those are all true. Why are you congratulating me? And again, I come from the business world. If I went and put my all into trying to get a deal, even if I knew the likelihood of me getting it was low, but that, I was hoping to at least get some kind of metric, and I fell far below that, I'm disappointed. I can look at whatever positives I want to, but the first thing I want to do is figure out and retool so that I can do better the next time, because I am going to do it again. I'm going to try to get that thing again. This was new, and it made me realize something. This party started as a form of protest against Richard Nixon taking us off of Bretton Woods, off the gold standard. And you had a bunch of basically nerdy gold bugs in a living room in Colorado 50 years ago, back in December of 71, who formed a party and immediately started running for the White House, knowing they didn't have a shot in hell. They were lucky to get 100,000, 50,000, whatever votes. They They knew it wasn't going to happen. They weren't even trying to pretend it was going to happen. I'm not even sure they were trying to build an infrastructure to make it happen. This was a pure protest. They weren't even trying to get people elected at the local level. It was literally just, we are not going to participate in this. If you are against this, vote for us just for no other reason than to protest. And over time, we have become an increasingly viable party. We are now the third largest party in the country with no real competition for that role. In fact, the gap between us and the Green Party in this last election widened from 2016. So we are now solidly the third largest party. And by percentage, we're the fastest growing party. And we have hundreds of elected libertarians. But along the way, what probably started as a coping mechanism, a reality that we weren't going to win, has basically nested and become our culture of losing. We just recognize we're never going to win. We get together at these conventions. We have this 4-year cycle where we get together and we go to these conventions and these meetups and these meetings and online, and we talk about what we're going to do, and we end the Fed and end taxation and end the wars and end the war on drugs and set America free and take over the world and leave everyone alone. And we talk about it unironically, well, sometimes ironically, but often unironically. And then because we don't have an actual blueprint to do that, then we immediately start nesting and attacking each other. Well, it's your fault we're not winning because you're too milquetoast. No, it's your fault we're not winning because you're too brutal about it and you don't connect with people. No, it's this guy's fault. Everyone hates him. No, it's this guy's fault. Everyone hates him. And we attack each other, which is certain to cause us to win at some point, right? And then we start fantasizing about the movie star or the former governor or the whatever who is going to become our nominee, and they're going to get on the debate stage through magic, and then they're going to have a big libertarian moment. They're going to say the libertarian things, and the world is going to watch this and say, my God, that's the best thing I've ever heard. Honey, we're switching our registration to libertarian tomorrow. And then when none of that happens, and when instead we get basically the margin for error in the election, then we go back to shaking our fists and saying it was never going to work. The system is rigged against us. The debate commission will never let us on. The media has it out for us. They were never going to give us a fair shot. And, we're fighting just to get on the ballots. It's never going to work. All hope is lost. And then we kind of lick our wounds over the holiday season and we come back the following year ready to do it all over again. That's never going to lead to success. And so what I've been trying to do post-election, and I've been going around the country doing this at conventions, I've been leading by example by creating our own events and working with other people that are making their own events and doing candidate trainings. And what I keep saying over and over again is this: stop trying to do this in a way that doesn't jive with what we actually believe. Stop trying to put someone in the White House and think that we're going to get trickle-down liberty from the White House. We don't even believe that that's how it works. We know it hasn't worked. We tried it for 50 years and it doesn't work, but we don't even believe that's how things are supposed to work. We don't believe in top-down coerced measures working. We believe in building things voluntarily at the grassroots level, at the decentralized level, and building up organically from there. It's everything we say, and yet that's not how we do things. And so what I'm saying is, let's focus on the races that we're winning without even trying to focus too much on it. Let's win thousands of city council and county councils and some state legislative races across the country, and then we can start killing people's main objections for not voting for us. You can't win. Yes, we can win. We win thousands of races. Your ideas sound like a pipe dream. Well, you can see how they're working in cities and counties, municipalities, and states across the country. I never hear from you except for a few weeks every 4 years. No, you don't. You hear from us constantly because we've taken over your city councils and county councils. All I ever see you do is fight each other. No, you're watching us build a movement from the bottom up. It's not rocket science to do what other people are successfully doing. What it does take is stepping back and being willing to look at what we're doing wrong and saying, this is a bad idea. Let's not do it this way. And that's hard to do, but it's what I'm trying to lovingly both suggest and lead by example in showing how we can do this.
Yeah, I see a lot of those problems with the Libertarian Party. I have mixed feelings about it because I do see a culture of losing and okay with that, and kind of a very small bubble of people that maybe could use some outside injections. But I also part of me does want to give you guys a little bit of slack in the sense that it is a little rigged against you in many ways, right? It's very difficult to get on the debate stage. And also, I think that both Jo Jorgensen and yourself could have been, and maybe you were, the best candidates in the world in terms of the decisions you made and the things you said. but you had a fraction of the resources of the other candidates, and you both started with very, very little national name ID. Is that part of why it's, I don't want to say, obviously you should still try, but is that why you got to go local? Because it's just such an uphill mountain to climb for that presidential race.
We have to do the presidential race and the gubernatorial races and senatorial races and stuff like that, if for no other reason than a lot of states require it for ballot access. They won't actually even recognize your party unless you have a presidential candidate or a gubernatorial candidate. Every state's different. So if for no other reason we need to do that, and we can leverage whatever attention we can get to spread the message, to get it out there, we should still run to win, because obviously right now we can't win, or at least the likelihood of us winning is exceedingly low. We haven't won yet, right? But if you shoot for winning, and however much you fall short, you're going to do much better than if you go and going, okay, guys, let's just talk to as many people as possible. You're not going to get the same level of engagement if you're not actually trying to win. But no, we need to focus the vast majority of our resources on the races that we can win. Why are we spending? We spent I think $3 million or two point something million dollars, just the campaign itself, not to mention all the people spending out of pocket for stuff. Millions of dollars we spent on this race. The Gary Johnson, Bill Weld campaign, they spent close to $20 million. Right? Imagine if we put those kinds of resources into people running for city, county, council, running for state legislative races, maybe even running for a couple of targeted congressional races that, the demographics of how things are laid out in terms of population density and the percentage of registered libertarians makes it make sense to possibly win a race or something like that. Imagine if we did that. Imagine if we, instead of having, I think it's like 300 elected libertarians, which is at or around an all-time high for us. Imagine if we had like 3,000 elected libertarians. And even if all or most of them are at the local level, it's 3,000 elected libertarians, and they're showing, mayor such and such is showing what they can do. We already have this. We have mayors and city council people and county council people across the country who every day are demonstrating what real libertarianism looks like. And more often than not, they're by themselves, or they have maybe one other person with them. What if we had libertarian majority city councils, and we can actually show that it works, that we have the best ideas? Because here's the problem, and you're right, the system is rigged against us. But when that's our central message, we are basically telling the voters we can't win. And even if they look at that and say, well, that's not fair at all, they're still not going to vote for us, because they're thinking, well, that's not fair, but they can't win. The system's rigged against them. If I show up to your house and I say, hey, I have this great product to sell you, but I can't tell you what it is, I'm just going to tell you how hard it was for me to even get on your doorstep to buy it. But I can't really tell you what it is because there's no way for me to do that. You're going to say, well, that's great. It sounds like I can't buy your product anyway. It sounds like there's no way for you to sell it. And then I'm like, you son of a bitch. I mean, it's like, I'm mad at you because I literally just told you that I can't win. And you're saying, sounds like you can't win. Let's show that we can win. Let's show that we actually are winning. Let's switch to where we can win, and let's show that our ideas work. And then from there, we can build up. And yes, still have people running for president, still running for governor, still running for Senate, if for no other reason than ballot access requirements. But let's do it the way that we actually believe things work, from the grassroots, decentralized level, and work our way up from there.
But so I guess I want to ask you about this, because I think there are, to some extent, they work in tandem, but to some extent they're pitted against each other, two alternative paths for achieving liberty through politics. One would be the Libertarian Party, capital L, which is like, full libertarian, running as a third party. The other is running as a Republican in the spaces where you can still do that and be very libertarian leaning. I've honestly of the disposition that, not through the fault of the LP in many ways, because it is a huge uphill mountain, but at least in the short term, that looks a lot more realistic a path to me, because people who are libertarian leaning and getting real libertarian policy changes accomplished, or at least getting the message out there on a lot of them and introducing bills. We have gotten a few at least. We've got Senator Rand Paul. We've got Representative Massey. We've got Justin Amash, who was elected as a Republican.
Right.
I'm saying he would have had a much harder time getting elected as a libertarian in the first place. Why do you think that's not a better path for liberty to be achieved through politics in the short term?
In the short term, it might be. honestly. In the short term, at the statewide and up level, it might be. I will say this. I mean, there is really one libertarian that's allowed to be in the Senate, and that's Rand Paul. But look what they make him do. Look at the appointments that they've made him vote for. Look at the bills they've made him vote for. Look at they let him do these filibusters, but then he ends up having to vote for the bill often, sometimes that he's had to vote for. Look at what he's had to do to be able to still have the party apparatus behind him. In Congress, you've got one libertarian right now, or maybe a couple. The first one that comes to mind is Thomas Massey, and when Justin Amash was in there, you had a small handful. And even though, because of the layout of the House of Representatives, it's not as necessary for them to vote for things that they hate, but they just become irrelevant because they're outnumbered by Republicans in both parties. Short term, if you want to get on the state legislature, it's obviously going to be easier to run as a Republican. If you want to get on Congress, it's going to be easier to run as a Republican. Long term, the Republican Party is part of the same machine that the Democratic Party is. It is built around I would argue, fascist system. It's corporatism. We call it crony capitalism, but it's corporatism. And Mussolini said that corporatism was the economic plank of fascism. I don't believe that we're going to be able to work within their system that they've built and change it from within. Look what they did to Ron Paul. At some point, they're going to allow you to come up to a certain point, and then that's it. You either have to be co-opted, or you just, they knock you down. You're not able to you're not able to continue rising unless you give up a certain level of your principle or autonomy in the process. And this is what I say to libertarian-leaning Republicans and libertarian-leaning Democrats who say the same thing on the other side. This is what I say to you all day long. Come join us. And in the meantime, if you still feel like you need to be a part of the RLC, then do it. Or if you still feel like you need to be, donating to Republicans who are small L libertarian Republicans, then do it. But help us grow this party so that one day you don't have to choose between your principles and electability. And in the meantime, if you need to continue working with them, then do it. And if you need to keep voting Republican in the higher races, it's a secret ballot. I won't even know unless you tell me. And if you tell me, I'm not going to give you too hard of a time. I voted Republican. I voted neocon Republican for many years. The last person to be vote shaming anyone is me. I voted for John McCain. I have literally nothing. I voted for George Bush in 2004. No one on this planet has less right to vote shame someone than me. So my thing is this: if you feel like right now it's worth sacrificing whatever level of principle you need to be able to have that electability, which obviously is exponentially more than we have right now, that's fine. But in the meantime, whatever you can, work to help us grow so that we don't have to do that. Because one day I want this party, something we've built from the grassroots, something that we haven't had to try to make ourselves something we aren't, to try to, bow to the feet of the people who might let us in their club. Make something completely different and topple theirs. That's what I'm working on. Nothing short of an electoral revolution. And in the meantime, if you feel like you still need to run or support or vote for, RLC candidates, who am I to stop you? There's some great RLC people.
Well, libertarians love kind of internal ideological debates, right? And to some extent, it is a bit of, these things are so far removed from like where we are today, but to some extent, foundationally, it does matter. And I wonder, somebody like Justin Amash, who's now a member of the Libertarian Party with a capital L, he is a classical liberal, right? He believes in a small and limited constitutional government, free markets, civil liberties, but he is not an anarcho-capitalist. He believes in significantly more role of government in a society than kind of anarcho-capitalists would. And I'm more in that camp. Other people are, I believe that you're more in the anarcho-capitalist camp.
Yeah, I'm an ANCAP.
But do you think that gap, sometimes to me that gap feels a little unbridgeable? I think on the issues of the day, right, we all want to go in the same direction, but sometimes I do think the LP wants to unite people under one banner that have some really big foundational differences. I don't know. What do you think?
We started that way. So when we talked about that living room in Colorado, that was a bunch of mostly ANCAPs or I guess ANCAPs and radical minarchists. people who wanted a very small government. That's what the party was founded on, was a union between two groups who recognized that, yeah, I don't think from a philosophical standpoint, there are key differences between, for example, and there are actually many different schools of thought, but if you want to kind of put one in, sort of put it into two camps, the anarchist camp, who says that everything should be handled by the free market, that government has no useful purpose, and the minarchist camp, who says essentially that you do need to have at least a small coercive authority in order to have a civil society, and everything else can be handled by the free market. Whichever camp you fall into, and yeah, Justin Amash clearly falls into the Hayekian, classical liberal constitutionalist camp, and I clearly fall into more of the Rothbardian, Spooner anarchist camp. That's fine. Here's my thing. If you look at, Brad, any successful movement that has had to bridge a big divide, what unites us is our common goal right now. As you said, starting this part of the question off, we are so far from even classical liberalism or minarchy. We're removed from what the Constitution says they're even supposed to be doing, which is far removed from the Articles of Confederation that it replaced. Like, minarchy we're not even there yet. So, for me to talk about, the Rothbard button, if you press this button and all government goes away, would you do it? Sure. Let me know when one of those exists. In the meantime, that is not, we live in the real world where our government is growing at every decade, it's growing exponentially. Like, it's literally just add a zero to everything. The debt, the taxes, the budgets, every 10 years, you can just add a zero. It's going completely out of control. And we're now seeing the fruits of that. I mean, we're seeing real serious discussions about telling people whether they are allowed to go outside again or not. Long term, this is not 14 days or, for 3 weeks or any of that. This is until the pandemic's over. Well, the pandemic's not going to be over. That's not going to happen. Anyway, the point is, this is where we actually are. And I think we often, as, again, a coping mechanism, we feel content arguing with each other about anarchy versus minarchy in order to kind of distract from the fact that we actually live in basically a fascist, I guess it's still a democratic system of government, but in terms of the level of control and the level of collusion between big business and government, it's at least corporatism, that part of fascism. We need to work together we all universally recognize, anyone within the liberty movement, even many constitutional conservatives who wouldn't even call themselves libertarians, we recognize, even some Justice Democrats, we recognize that this is bad and that it's getting worse. And to whatever extent we can work with anyone to be able to roll back the things that we all agree are bad. And when we get to the point where we've achieved minarchy, or at least getting close to approaching it, then I'd be more than happy to have a big argument with you over whether we should just continue eliminating government and just have a fully free market society, or whether this minimal government will suffice. I will be more than happy to have a screeching match with you over that. I would rather figure out how to work together to build a movement to end this and at least stop it from continuing to get worse, and then begin rolling it back. And we can, like I said, the camps can break into their opposing camps, and we can fight over minarchy versus anarchy all day long once we have actual minarchy.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a pretty good place to be, I think, where we're having the fights over whether or not to privatize the police, because we've already privatized everything else.
Yes.
So I guess I'll leave you with this kind of question before we get to the food take. What's your short pitch for people for how they can get involved in the LP and start, enacting some of the stuff that you're talking about?
Well, obviously, join the LP, lp.org/join. But that just adds you to the roles. Get involved locally. Reach out to every state has a Libertarian Party affiliate. So reach out to your state affiliate, see if there's a local affiliate in your area. And there more than likely is. And if there's not, then work with them to start your own. And meet other like-minded libertarians who are nearby and work to start your own things. And resist the urge to just have meetings where you get together and kvetch about the government, say how terrible it is, and then go home. Try to reach out to your community, right? Whatever your community is. Your community, when you hear community, you think like your local area. And that's true too. Reach out if you're in the gaming community, if you're in the I don't know, dancing community, if you're in the skating community, if you're into a specific type of sport or video game or whatever it is, whatever you're into, reach out to people in your community and share your message. Not by trying to cram it down their throats and call them status bootlickers if they don't immediately adopt all of your beliefs in the very moment, just like I'm sure you did when you first heard it, right? If instead, just putting your ideas out there in a conversational way, and making connections with people. And if you actually decide to become involved in your local affiliate or your state affiliate, start meeting with like normie groups and civic societies like the Optimist Club and the Rotary Club and stuff, and just say you'd like to meet with them and hear what they have to say, and then talk with them about libertarian ideas. Meet with groups that already agree with you on one issue. Police accountability groups, marijuana decriminalization groups. There's a big growing psychedelic decriminalization groups. Meet with anti-lockdown, anti-mask mandate people. Meet with people and where you already meet and where you already agree on things, and then work from there. They don't have to necessarily be 100% libertarian, but they can help you accomplish this goal. And in doing so, you are showing, not only are you actually accomplishing the goals that you have, instead of talking about it and yelling about it for the rest of your life, you're actually accomplishing it, and people are benefiting as a result. We're reducing the harm of the state, but you also then can show that libertarians are leading from the front. We are leading in the efforts to make people more free and have them benefit as a result of it. These are the types of things that we should do. And then from there, we build up that movement. But yeah, get involved locally.
All right, that's a good place to leave it. Guys, if you want to know more about Spike, his social media links and website will be in the description below. But before we go, let us know what your most controversial food opinion is.
The best food on earth is smoked salmon. I said what I said.
I don't eat any fish or seafood of any kind.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I'll
tell you, you're missing out. You're literally missing out on the best food on earth, smoked salmon.
All right. Well, people will have to tweet at you and let you know what they think of that. Spike, thanks so much for your time.